leadership of your agency. So this is Tim Strobel, and he is our coordinator for all of, what, 5 weeks?
Yeah.
6 weeks. And he's doing a wonderful job, and he'll tell you more about the kind of boots on the ground.
Okay. You guys don't mind if I stand? It took me 2 hours to get here just from Suffolk County. Traffic was lovely. As I said, my name's Timothy Strobel, and I'm the project coordinator for the Joseph Dwyer Veterans Peer Support Program. A little bit of background on myself. I'm retired from the U.S. Army. I took a round over in Iraq through the leg. And as I was being medevaced out, I'm sure all of you remember the Walter Reed scandal, I was literally in the air as that broke. So when I landed in Maryland, they were like, no. And I got sent up to West Point with the order that the Warrior Transition Unit was just, we got to build a unit specifically for wounded soldiers. Being the only one up there, the company commander pretty much told me to design programs that would be good for me. What would a wounded soldier want? So while I was up there, I did pretty much similar to what we have here. I had a weekly PTSD support group. We just called it, our group. We sat down, talked about issues. I also set up a battle buddy system for people who suffered from nightmares. Somebody would stay awake all night with the BlackBerry. If anybody had a nightmare, just go down to his barracks room, sit down and talk about it. I personally suffer from PTSD, and when I retired in 2009, I had it really, really bad. While I was over there, I had the honor and the privilege of being the senior medic for Charlie Company 118. It's a mechanized infantry unit in the Big Red 1 out of Schweinfurt, Germany. While being the senior medic, I wanted to protect my guys from as much as possible. So I was the one who did all what's known as EJKs, the extrajudicial killings. So unfortunately, I got to see a lot more than I would have liked to. There was a couple that stuck with me very, very, strongly. It's what's known as intrusive thoughts. When you don't want to think about it, unfortunately, you think about it. So I ended up on out here at Northport. The second floor is the psychiatric ward. And I was in there for 3 months. And when I came out, I was on 16 different medications. I could hardly keep my head up. And just so happened that as I was getting out, a buddy of mine from up on West Point moved down to Long Island. And we got together, and it turned into a weekly thing. And we got together once a week. We just go over to the YMCA and we play basketball and just talk about things. And I'm happy to say that because of that, I don't have nightmares anywhere near as frequently as I used to. I don't have intrusive thoughts anywhere as frequently as I used to. He suffered from PTSD as well, and, he'd be like, well, this is what I do. I breathe like this, or in the middle of the night I do this, or I exercise before bed. And we helped each other through that, just sitting down and talking it out. And that's the entire premise behind peer-to-peer. And the Joseph Dwyer program, my entire staff we have no clinicians on staff. We're all veterans. We all have history with PTSD. As I said, right now we have 6 part-time facilitators, ranging in age from, we have a 24-year-old sergeant from the National Guard, and we have a gentleman who was in Vietnam, who also just so happens to be a psychiatrist and a social worker. I apologize, social worker, and he has his PhD as well. So our staff the experience is, very vast and very wonderful. I'm handling things a little bit differently. Right now we're doing all outreach. I'm going from college to college, getting in with the student veteran organizations and setting up different outreaches, setting up a program right now where celebrities are going to come down to try to draw the younger guys in. So as they said, the younger generation, the modern generation of veterans, we don't like hearing we have PTSD. We don't like the stigma attached to it. And I personally, I know I have it, I just don't like saying it. So another thing that you have to make sure is that, we provide chow, and food is definitely a draw for them. But like I said, we're setting things up a little different. Biking's very big now. So there's different groups that do, there's the Wounded Warrior Project. I know they're very controversial, but they're a perfect example. They have the soldier ride. So, a lot of the younger guys are getting into biking. So we're going to have a group where, 10, 12 guys get together, ride, 20, 30 miles and chat along the way, stop along the way, and have a group like that. It's very important that we also do multi-generational, in my opinion, because the Vietnam guys have been suffering with this for how long now? And considering it's the younger guys are coming in and not knowing how to cope with this, unfortunately. If you've been having nightmares for a year and you don't know what to do, and you look next to you, and there's a guy who's been doing it for 30 years, how have you been dealing with it? Yes, it's a different generation, but if you ask pretty much any veteran, the thing that they miss the most about the military, it's camaraderie. Right? It's the brotherhood. Now, yes, not him. It's a Vietnam veteran. That's just your older brother. And eventually that's how our groups have been progressing, and that's how they're looking at it. The networking of these guys, the younger guys, are becoming friends with the older guys, which, like I said, it's perfect because they've been coping with this for so long. It'll teach them different ways to, if you have a nightmare, you can call this guy, or if you have a nightmare, this is how I handle it. And if, from my understanding, we had one World War II guy actually show up to one of these meetings, and he's been suffering since 1947. So who better to teach? We're not a substitute for psychiatrists whatsoever. We're just an alternative. As I said, if somebody's been dealing with it since 1947, they might have a little bit of knowledge. I've been getting a couple calls from family members. We've been putting flyers everywhere. I actually just moved this weekend, and as I went to go pick up the moving truck, one of our flyers was in the budget rental car place, which is great. But I've actually been getting calls from mothers whose children or whose son suffers from PTSD and he won't leave the house. And as I said, it's a totally different world. Like, I'm wearing this BlackBerry and I have my iPhone in my pocket, and I'm available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to anybody who needs me. So is my team. We hand out our cards, and they have our cell phone numbers on it. They have our email addresses on it, and we're there for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Which, as I said, we're not clinicians; we're peers. Who's better to turn to in a time of mental, or I won't call it a mental crisis, but thinking back about if you lost people, or if you're having survivor's guilt. Who better than the people who have been there? I was in a firefight that lasted 6 hours. I literally survived 13 IEDs. So if someone's, they hear a big bang outside at work and, it starts to shake them up, they know that they can call me because I hate bangs as well. And I know how to cope with it. Our groups are, as we said, the younger guys don't like the stigma of it, but there's also another issue. We have, Suffolk County police officers or Nassau County police officers who are in the National Guard, and, one day they're in a firefight over in Iraq, 2 days later they're back in a patrol car. All right, they're suffering from PTSD, or they're suffering from TBI, but they can't come right out and say it because it'll affect their job. So our groups are 100% as confidential as you like. All right, like you said, on the 13th we have to go up to the Senate, so I have to report statistics, so we have a sign-in sheet. But as long as you write something on there, you write your initials, you write your first name. You write what area you're from. I don't care if you write Bugs Bunny, as long as I can count that, this many people showed up. And as he also said, the amount of people, well, the more people are obviously better, because then there's more people who know things. The quality is not the quantity, but I'm happy to say that our groups are, we just started a new group last week out of nowhere. Like, literally, one of our facilitators went to do an outreach thing. It called, checked walked in, he's like, all right, I got 9 guys, we're starting a group next week, next Wednesday, and we need a location. And that's how it's been going, and there's a definite need for this, because again, they don't, you don't want to hear you have PTSD, but you know that there's something wrong. You know you're not sleeping, or you know that you're thinking about things that you shouldn't. And once the word gets out there that it's a peer program, and you're not going to, you're not going to see a psychiatrist. You're just going to go sit in a room with other veterans who have been there, who have been on the same, who have been on Route Jackson, Route Irish, who have been in IDs, who have been in firefights. It's a different world, than the mental health world is. We work with them. Obviously, we have our resources, as they said. We have to. We have monthly trainings. We had one with Dr. Dowling. We had a 2-day training with Mo Armstrong, who, if you do Google the man, you see any YouTube video, let me tell you, he's an interesting individual. But he's been doing this forever, and the training was absolutely, it was invaluable. He gave us a workbook, and like she said, in one meeting we'll do an exercise. What sets you off? What are your coping mechanisms? And one of our groups, one of my Tuesday night groups that we have, it's the most populated group. The facilitator actually did her own exercise. It was, don't know if any of you remember when MTV barely had shows and it was just music videos. But there was a show called If You Truly Knew Me, You Would Know That I ... Alright? And what they did was, anonymously, they wrote, if you truly knew me, you would know that I. And some of the things that were put out is stuff that the Vietnam guys hadn't talked about in 30 years. All right, we have one guy in our group, in that particular group, who MST, military sexual trauma. Now he was raped, and he had never talked about it, but he put it out in that group, in that anonymous format to see what would happen. Now he had already told the facilitator the week before about this, worried that the group would judge him, because he had PTSD. But he didn't have it through a combat stressor. That was his PTSD. Military sexual trauma. The man was raped, and he was worried that if the group found out, that they would judge him. They would, mock him, kick him out. Things that he had been worried about for decades. But when he put it out like that, he found out that the group, they didn't judge him. They validated his feelings, which is another major thing about this group. Is you don't want to feel, there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with these men. These are wonderful men who did something wonderful for their country. And putting them in a room together and, validating that it's okay to be like this. That it's the entire premise behind this group. As of right now, the program, we have 5 groups with the 6th one starting hopefully this week. We hold, as you said, we have a good relationship with the Beacon House. We hold one there right now. We're holding another one there this Wednesday until we can find a permanent home for it. I'm starting another group on Stony Brook. Our groups are they're popping up. As soon as we get the word out, the group is, automatically we get phone calls or we get emails. I'd like to know when a group is, where a group is, to the point that we actually have to be starting more. And of course, he's the man with the checkbook, so we have to hire more people. But we have multiple times. So if you can't make an evening group, you can make a morning group. We're gonna eventually, our goal is to have a morning group and an evening group 5 days a week. And as you heard me say, it was originally called the Joseph Dwyer Veterans PTSD Peer Support Group, but we took the PTSD out again to eliminate the stigma. I'm very pleased to say that the Northport VA has given us their full backing. They hang up our flyers if somebody's having an issue with going there and they're a little worried about it. They'll recommend us. Did I miss anything? So, that's my presentation, guys. My first.
One thing to think, all groups are co-facilitated.